Welcome to Portals of Perception and to Current Openings. What the world doesn't quite get yet. A conversation where David Price Francis and I endeavor to swim in the current of this moment to discover what is opening. Today is a spontaneous call that swiftly developed through a chain of events that I will describe in a moment. And we have had 4 or 5 different themes or names for this episode, and late last night it emerged, and I know you're hearing about it for the first time, David, that we're going to call it Core Premises or 20 Core Premises. So current opening episode 19, Core Premises, or we may actually choose in the end to call it Who Are You, Dear Human? Or perhaps we may call it Spiritualizing the Universe. David, welcome.
Thank you, Aviv. This is all happening in the now. This is new to you last night, new to me today. So in the spirit of current openings, it'll be interesting live process.
Well, so in the interest of transparency, a couple of days ago, this is by the time it will be published, it's been the rear view mirror, but we're recording this over this weekend with major solar flares and a new gushing electrics and energetics coming into the planet from a solar source. And a couple of days ago, I was just musing and reflecting on many things, the different domains that I'm working into, and something came over me, which emerged in reflecting on our recording several months ago when we recorded the open heart conversation.
Yes.
And the nature, the essence of what emerged with me had this, paraphrasing on the words of a great teacher who once said, when two men no longer inspire each other, the world will come to an end even sooner. You may have the more exact quotation. And I said, we ought to continue to inspire each other, humans all over the planet, because it's through the medium of what we engender in each other, men to men, and all genders in between and all across the universe. We are here to inspire each other, and the moment we no longer inspire ourselves, men and women and ladies, then something in this world begins to die. And what I essentially did, I recorded this audio message that I sent you on WhatsApp, and it said, the essence of what it said was, time is short, time is precious, even if we've got another 2 or 3 decades. Let's make the most of every day. Let's make every next adventure we develop as though it is the last one, hoping to have 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 or few hundred more last ones, but giving without holding back. And you responded in kind, swiftly. And although it wasn't planned, because for me this is a very packed week, we said, yeah, let's meet and have a spontaneous recorded call and we'll see what happens. So that was just a couple of days ago. And once we agreed, I had one theme in mind, and then about an hour or two later there was another theme that presented itself. And I want to explain how that happened and why it was shape-shifting, and reflect about the state of being, and let that be the kind of the framing, the launching platform for today. And then the rest of the call, we're going to look to reverse engineer the core premises that enable that kind of state of being. So what happened was that I'm currently working into half a dozen different projects. In a few days, I will be conducting over the coming weekend a global event as part of the Epoch Journey network. And I had an inquiry that came my way about what we describe as the current of the epoch. And so I'm in a contemplative space about how will I describe it and what might be a way to truly open that successive, explorative, continual running revelation in a way that a large group of people can unfold it. So in the course of that, there is a whole cosmology, energetic cosmology that opens up. And when I'm in this space, and I was contemplating about that space, something turned up in me that would be useful for me to work with you into today, because it will prime certain domain in me. Right. Then concurrently, I'm working with the IHA, the internal human orchestra work, on some new practices, specifically around the idea of how the human is so crowded and that we ought to build capacities to create space, ever-enlarging space, such that we can integrate new appreciations, new sentiments, new conductive potencies and powers and new processes. So that is working in my mind. And then I said, well, I think therefore, since we're going to meet today, there is something else that would be useful. So the premise for today shifted. But then I'm also working into a couple of weeks from now, we're going to run another Portals into the Soul event where we're going to focus on chapter 2. And early in chapter 2, I describe there is a download of bullets of some elements in the meta-crisis. And I've had an email exchange and a suggestion from a friend that it'd be great to build on those themes of the meta-crisis, which they describe a range of crisis points all over the planet, and each of which has an interior dimension that is parallel to the one that's articulated in the list. For example, it talks about a leadership void. Well, the interior is the need for the human to find self-leadership. It, for example, describes the depletion and the poisoning of oceanic habitats. And the interior human parallel is, well, what about the salted water in the human? And are these still as conductive as they can be and ought to be to facilitate human development and evolution? So I said, this is a typical, beautiful current openings conversation to go deep on this with you, because you'll bring to it unique insights and know-how, and that will help me very much if we did that. So that was the point where I texted you that maybe we will do current concerns, that would be the focus. And it kept on shifting. And then I recognized that in a matter of few hours, and then the following morning, I was being transformed half a dozen times. And it brought me into the reflective awareness and contemplation that when you are centered in the physicality of human life, in the physical body, you get up in the morning and you recognize yourself because you look in the mirror and you are more or less the person you knew yourself to be yesterday. When, however, you become more attuned to the energetic properties, to the states of consciousness and inner awareness and inner attunements and the dimensions of subtle energy spaces that you inhabit, you can go through a change of form and a change of focus and a change of configuration. Sometime, half a dozen times or dozen times or even more in just a matter of an hour or 20 minutes. And that very much reflected for me another body of work that's in the background continually, which is the Universalis project, because we're just preparing for another Universalis call also next week. So I felt this was going to be a useful space for us to go spontaneously live, just to reflect on what do we mean in this, what do I mean in describing this to be the early stages of the emergence of the Universalis human, in describing the fact that you don't need to wait for the afterlife to inhabit multiple places in the universe. Actually, it begins right here, right now, where you have the permission to reconfigure yourself sometime in a matter of an hour through different states and different focus areas. And literally, as you walk into those different spaces or rooms in the invisible mansion of your life, when you do so, you are reconfiguring who you are. You're changing. You are physically the same, more or less the same person, but in terms of who you have become in the subtle form, you are a different cosmology. So I thought that would be the space for us to explore. And then I said, well, we ought to do that, but do that with assistance and help. As a result of which, late last night, I sat down and in a matter of 20 minutes, I populated a slide with 20 core premises that are foundational and would offer a bridging assistance to what I was just describing, which could be viewed as rather compound description or advanced, and we are not shying away from it in current openings. However, we want to reverse the conversation, or not reverse engineer, but reverse, so to speak, reverse engineer, reflect on some of the bridging steps to be able to assimilate what I'm describing as a universalis state of being. So I just said a lot there, and I'd invite you to speak to whatever comes alive for you in that. And then my suggestion is that I bring those on the slide 5 at a time, and we play jazz with that. And this is in your core domain, in the house of in your house of power, and teaching for many years. So the fact that you had no preparation and no alert about anything I was going to say and where we're heading is perfectly natural, and there's no problem in that. So how about that as an opening?
Okay. It's very current opening. Main thing is I'm staying with you as you're speaking it, so I'm listening intently to what you're saying. And with regard to what catches me inside of all of that as a potency is that human universalis idea, and to highlight to those listening that we're built for that, we're designed for that, and we have equipment in us that can handle lunar frequency, planetary frequency, solar frequency, star frequency. So this weekend with the geomagnetic storm that came through, it affected all of us, whether we were asleep, whether we were awake. It not only, I know the technology level, the world focuses on will it affect the satellites and will the internet go down and what will happen with the phones. I'm more interested in what does it do to our brains and our mental complex, because that energy coming through has a direct impact on all of our energy field, our aura, our mental faculties, our emotional faculties. So although the modern world doesn't see it, we just had a major astrological event, because energy coming to the planet, that mostly gets classified under astrology. The science kind of separates it out, astrology, astronomy. But if you just see that there's a major energy washed through the planet, it's affected all life on Earth. It can't not. It's like when it rains, everyone gets wet. When there's a solar storm comes through, you might be sleeping in your bed, but the energy is passing through your system.
So it was an astrophysical event. It was, you're saying, astrological event. What other word will you choose? Because some people see astrology to be symbols of planets on a astrological chart, and yet what we experienced carried an energetic dimension that impacts the fine human system. And if on this weekend you didn't even need to be too sensitive to actually feel it. If you're very sensitive, you felt it in all sorts of ways. You felt it on your skin, you felt it on your cheekbones, you felt it on your forehead, you could feel it on your head. I know what I'm describing may sound science fictional for some, but if you trained yourself to feel the subtle energetic content that's pouring through, then you'd recognize it. And so in that, I'm already describing that it's beyond astrophysical and astrological. It is a astro something else, astro subtle psychoactivating event as well, in which one can wonder whether it's purely just random event, or whether there is some kind of a galactic clock or time sequence of how this larger system is unfolding, in which we just received a message on planet Earth from the solar system. Hey, get on with your business, will you? Because we're going to ratchet up the conductivity here.
Well, the last 2 weeks, curious enough, starting before this event, I've been working with a group of folks about finer and denser sensations. And exactly what you're saying, like a denser sensation, I can reach out and I can physically feel this mug, I can feel the cup, I can feel the glass. That's a denser sensation that I can register through my soul, through my body, and feel that physical matter. But we're also energetic beings, clearly. And I've been working into something which are scientifically called proprioceptors, which I prefer to call transponders, which is the fact that we can actually, dancers work with this a lot, they can register the space they're in because their proprioceptors are constantly working, picking up how much space we have behind us. Can I jump into that space? And it's quicker than we can think. It's instinctive and it's faster than we can actually think. So our rational mind catches up afterwards. Well, those proprioceptors are also designed to register our place in the universe and what's coming in that way from the universe. So I think of I redefined astrology, a bit cheeky, but I think of it as universal energies and their effect on organic life on Earth. That's how I premise it. And going back a few thousand years, the energetic and the physical were not separated out. So that geomagnetic storm coming through, as it's called, is, as you said, a surge of energy. And we tend to think of the sun and the planet and the moon as almost random robotic. I mean, it amazes me how people can say how the moon just happens to be in exactly the position to cover the sun, so we just see the corona. It's happenstance, it's just random. Well, the chances of that being random, I think, are extremely remote. And when looking at the sun and its natural 22-year cycle, like the last major solar event of this nature was 2003. We're just close to that 22-year cycle, which the Egyptians knew about. They put a lot of emphasis on the number 22 to do with that solar cycle. So another way to look at it is like, could it be that the sun has just, in a way, blown a kiss toward the planet? If we look at those terms, like deliberately sent a certain energy in a certain direction. Now, science will say that's impossible. It's not the way the universe works. The universe isn't really intelligent, but the evidence continues to mount that the universe is way more intelligent than the human. In reality, we're always trying to discover things, which means take the cover off In other words, it's already there. And then we put a human name to it. And so this is Boyle's law, or this is Heidegger's principle. But those things are all there in the universe, put there in the fabric of the universe. And the human is following up behind going, oh, I discovered something new. Oh, this is Newton's law. This is Heidegger's law. It was all there. We just put human names to it, but the core principles are actively at work. So, hey, let's have fun with the 20 core premises.
Well, this is exactly right, because what you offered is exactly now the setup piece. So we're going to, in some way, rethread through some of the ideas we already surfaced and bring them to life with a certain order. So current openings 19, 20 core premises. And premise 1 is energy is the foundational substance, the core currency of the universe. We've done a whole episode on this that can be found on the current openings landing page, where we talked about the energy problem, but also the energy potential. So that's premise 1, and we just included that.
We're there on it, yes, we're already there.
We are recapitulating, re-establishing it here in this way. Premise 2 is the universe contains a full spectrum of energies. It's not just one kind of energy. When we talk about the energy in the universe, we are describing a whole spectrum of electromagnetic energies. Number 2 and number 3, science has only been able to so far measure 5% of the energetic spectrum and content and account for that. But our assertion and suggestion here in premise 4 is that the energy range and dimensions expand beyond the current. Did I spell correctly there, expand? I think so. Yes. This was late last night, quick production. Expand beyond what current science has been able to measure. So it is, these are the 4 initial premises that lead me to say, number 5, the universe contains subtle fields of power, which are for the soul and the spirit what oxygen is for the lungs. So these are this kind of the foundational trace. Again, I was in my mind where we just visited, and I said, what would be some building blocks, some foundational formations, mental formations, configurations in your mind that will help assimilate that? And these were the first 5 that turned up. What would you say to this? How would you play jazz with these ideas?
Well, curiously, I'd start with 20 current openings premises and how close that is to the human promise. 20 current openings promises. 1 letter difference. So inside the premise is the promise. Why do I make a fuss about that? Because if we don't have the premise, then we can't go into a promise. So let me open that up a bit. So the fact that there is energy in the universe and that we receive and process that energy gives us the promise. That's the premise, gives us the promise of being able to refine energetically, so that the human has this amazing ability to choose. Unlike, I would say, we looked at this in the planetary program in an earlier current openings, the rest of organic life on the planet is fixed onto particular frequencies. Everything that exists in organic life is processing energy. So everything that exists is processing universal energies in some fashion, whether lunar energy, solar energy, energy from different planets is being processed and received by planet Earth. So I think of the planet in that sense as this great, amazing crucible of receiving different energies, and she needs form, almost like a satellite dish, to receive an energy. So whether it be a squirrel, whether it be a cat, whether it be a tree, a bird, everything is processing energetics and delivering that energy into the energy field of the planet. Now, the human has this amazing additional promise, which is that we're able to tune in. We're like a radio set that can actually tune in to different levels of frequency. Like you say, the universe contains a full spectrum of energies. Well, we can see this at very simple level, even with the idea of the spectrum of light, and we can choose what we look at. I mean, we can walk to a place and choose to look at something. We can choose to go to a particular movie. We can choose to read a particular book. We can make choices, and those choices bring in a certain frequency of energy. And according to the energies that we create in our energy field, which I would point out actually starts inside our body. I don't think of the aura as something external to us. It actually starts within and then radiates out into that field. So within us, we're an electromagnetic spirit soul being in carnal form, and we're able to process different levels, like the energy range and dimension of energies that we can actually process is very wide. And no two humans on the planet, 8 billion people, no two humans have processed in their life exactly the same energy. Even if they were twins born in the same house, they've processed different energies. We have a unique individual energy signature. And I think part of that human promise is the premise is there for us. It's foundational, it's there. We live in a world of energy and matter, but matter itself is condensed energy. So we're in the energy and material world, and we're able to develop according to what we bring into ourselves and process through ourselves, which is an incredible human permission that nothing else on the planet actually has. When I look at dolphins, whatever person says, well, what about dolphins? Well, they're on a fixed frequency. It can be a very high frequency, high vibration frequency, but the human has this full range from low vibration or denser vibration to very fine vibration. And the alchemists had a saying that all can be done by refinement. And I think that speaks very much to the human development process within the foundational premises.
Well, in many ways, you see that the next 15 frames, and I'm not surprised because they're all connected. What I will build on this is, once again, the recognition that if energy is the core currency, the foundational substance of the universe, we can begin to understand this idea that this is a universe that loves economics. It loves economics in the sense of it loves to create impact. It abhors the usage or the wastage of energy without it delivering impact. And it also loves the idea that energy can continue to transform and refine itself. So we are exposed to this idea of different forms of energy earlier on in the very early lessons in physics, when we see that, yes, energy that is light can be transferred into heat and so on and so forth. What we are proposing here is that there are many other forms of energy, and those subtle forms of energies that we are describing are very much the substance, if I can use that word, and it's better to describe it as subtle energy, that is indeed for the soul and the spirit what oxygen is for the lungs. What also is important in this first run to reflect on is, in one of the Portals into the Soul chapters, I describe the sense of how the current threshold that we are at in terms of the scientific research and scientific discovery, which is that we call the other 95% of the universe dark energy and dark matter, which are names we give to the realization that the mathematical formulation of what we've been able to describe in terms of the laws of the universe teach us or reveal to us that there is another 95% of the universe that's there that we haven't been able to see, witness, experience, or measure. And my contemplative invitation is, well, could it be that as we evolve as humans, we ourselves are going to be able to give rise to the 6th and the 7th and the 8th and the 9th and the 10% to reveal themselves. So one way to come into this is to begin with premise number 6 that says, I am the energy I process. You are the energy you process. And number 7, the realization that about 330 billion cells are replaced daily, equivalent to about 1% of all your cells. And that means that in 80 to 100 days, 30 trillion cells will have been replenished, the equivalent of a new you. So biologically, you could say you're a new person every 80 to 100 days. At the same time, in terms of your energetics, the subtle energetic form that you are changes much faster than the cells of your body. So you, in a matter of a day, you could have been remade, renewed, and regenerated several times. And so, therefore, in premise 10, I'm suggesting that your subtle energy field generates and expresses the automatic processes in your body and your thoughts, your feelings, and your connections. And those are able to do a refresh cycle, a regenerate and renew cycle so quickly. And that is one of the reasons to begin to practice attunement and sensitivity and be even more focused on that sense rather than the degree to which we are also obsessed with our physical form. I'm not saying we shouldn't take care of our physical form, as we will see later. One of the next premises will talk about the physical as the carrier of the subtle energetic form. At the same time, the greatest care we can give to our physical form begins with our energetics. Our granddaughter stayed here overnight, and her grandma just took her to school, and she woke up in the morning and she asked us a very interesting question. She said, she's a 4-year, not old, but young, 4-year young, little beautiful, smart girl, and she said, why is the skin so smooth in the morning? And I treat one of my orientations and alignments with youngsters, with children, is you got to talk to their age, but you also at the same time got to talk to the more adult in waiting in them. And I gave her a full answer. I explained to her that there is a process through sleep, a 7-fold process where we get energetically replenished, and every cell in our body is replenished energetically. And that there is an energetic form, call it the angel of sleep, or the 7-fold nature of the frequency wavelength that washes over you during sleep, that because of that you wake up in the morning and the skin on your face and the skin on your hands will be so very smooth and replenished. And she looked at me and took it in and moved on to play with her dolls, which is perfectly right. So all of that is to do with the relationality of the energetics and the physical form, and that even what powers those cells to regenerate and renew and replenish is a profound energy wash that attends to us all the days of our life.
Yes.
So please play jazz with these, and
I call it it's the cycle of recharge. It's one of the natures, I think, of the soul. I think of it like a rechargeable battery. It's like we start to run down, we start to run out of energy, we go to so-called sleep, we recharge, we have energy again. It seems quite obvious that energy doesn't so much come from our food and our drink, but it actually comes from that direct input overnight. So, yeah, I'm right with you on that. And the fact of there being a sevenfold process that would fit with the idea of the spectrum, we're used to working with the seven of things, a spectrum of sevenfold light. We think of music as having a seven scale sound spectrum. So somehow there's this relationship between the human and seven levels, as you said, the spectrum of energy. And one thing that's really been dawning on me when adding up about the 95% of the universe still being in the state of dark matter, as they call it, or the unknown state, is what value that puts upon matter. If matter is condensation of energy, and only less than 5% has actually been condensed into matter. Well, the value for the planet, the fact of a planet, the fact of a material planet is sacred. If the Earth wasn't here, we would have nowhere to live. We would have nowhere to stand. And we're designed to be able to handle the two worlds of both energy and matter, both simultaneously, which is part of the incredible human permission, that both of those are fused together. And I think then in relation to, let's say, the energy we get from physical food, the energy we get from liquid, the energy we get from gas, all of which go in through our mouth, the lowest hole in our face, and go down to be combusted. But then we have other energy that comes straight in through our eyes, which are part of our brain, and goes straight into our brain, and our ears, energy going straight into our brain. So we have senses which are working more with denser frequency, which the gravity takes the air and the liquid and the solids down. And then we have these finer vibrations, which are direct electrical impressions. And I would include in that the transponders, as I like to call them, in the cells, which are constantly, and this is I've really working with this last couple of weeks, how the cells, the transponder aspect is both transmitting and receiving, in that we can actually feel the energy coming from solid objects. And that's not only just sensing what is coming from them, we can actually feel distances based upon the energy receptors, almost like a bat. We're sending energy out and we're receiving energy back. We use our eyes so much that we underestimate how much our spatial orientation works through every individual cell. So there's 330 billion cells being replaced daily, and yet we still are able to register where we are. We're still able to have a sense of space. We still are even able to call over in the realms of thinking what our name is, our address. Again, recently I've been working with the finer sense of the mind and the denser aspect of the mind. And I came to the conclusion, value your monkey mind. Don't go the Eastern route and say, I want to get rid of it. Because that lower mind has the executive function of being able to schedule, being able to plan, being able to do things. The danger is that the denser sensing can take over the whole system. So to be able to have a system of gradation where we're able to keep our executive mind, in that sense, working at one level, which is denser, and have an openness to new ideas, new current openings coming through. And also that way with our emotion. There's what I call default emotion, which is where we are defaulting to feelings we've had before, and actually being able to rise up and ascend into where new feelings are also possible. So we can have new feeling, new thinking, new sensing in the higher end of the energy spectrum as those in the transformation, working with those subtle energies, as you call them.
So you're really elucidating and bringing to life, David, the spectrum and the range of denser and finer in everything we touch. And certainly what you are inviting us to recognize is that with each of the five senses, first physical senses, even in those senses, there is a way in which those get more oriented to the physical, denser end, and there is a way in which even those senses can tune more into the subtle, more refined dimension of their senses. So we can see the physical objects and we can train ourselves to see also the subtle energy field. We can, in a similar way, touch in different ways. So we can touch physically, but we can also touch in a way that will feel the energy that comes out of my fingers. And in one recent I-How practice, we offered that as an imagery, but it was more than an imagery. It was, could you try to expand your listening, not to listen just with the physical ears, but to recognize, so I'm deliberately putting my arms here, that you can actually extend your listening to the whole field with your arms. Because you can try this, each of what I'm describing takes practice, but we can listen with a lot more than just listen with our ears. And we're talking about subtle dimensions of the human processing life and the human machinery and the human range, all of which leads me now to bring further this idea that what you connect to has frequency range, wavelength, and energetic form and shape. So as you just described, there is a whole range of frequencies, and the thoughts we have, the feelings we configure, they also create a shape and a form inside our field and inside us. And then happy or sad, inspired or depressed, describe different energetics, and they each represent a shift in your subtle energy. And therefore, development, refinement, and connection work, they shift the shape and nature of your subtle form. And add to that now two bigger premises, which is that when you focus on and identify with the physical form, with the physical body, you think death is an end. However, when you recognize that you are a subtle, energetic, spiritual form for which the body is a carrier, death is a change of form, not an end. What would you say to these? What do they bring up in you?
Well, I started to refer to death by a new name, which is liftoff, which is to do with ascension, because heavier, denser things, they tend to go down, and lighter, brighter things tend to ascend, tend to go up. So what happens at the time of death is that the aura disappears, because I've registered this. There's no aura. There's still an energy field around the body, which is to do with the bones and the flesh and the physical matter. But the spirit, the soul, that core energy is no longer there to create the energy field around us, the bubble around us. So something leaves. And where does it go? What happens with it? Well, that's a whole other question. But something that does happen is that it lifts off. So death is a division, like die is interesting, or die as in division. To die is a separation out of the energy body and the physical body. And then depending upon what the energy body consists of, and that's where the word destiny is very interesting. And to change the letters around, it says density. So we have the density of our energetic form is then determining what frequency range, wavelength, and energetic form and shape is there at the end of our days. In a way, it's like we've got permission to keep transforming our energy field a planetary level for as long as we still have the carrier. This is where having just experienced this recently and being grateful for the fact of the carrier continuing and hopefully for many more cycles of the planet, it's a continuing opportunity. The premise offers the promise again. So the premise of being able to change the energy field around me and for every human being on the planet, then each human being has that promise. And we can transform our energy field much more rapidly than we can even, as you said, much more rapidly than we might put makeup on our face. You think a new thought, you just put something into your field that wasn't there before. You have a feeling and it may cause a flaring out from the throat, as an example. So different energies appear in the energy field at different levels. And one thing I've learned to watch for is the brightness or the illumination of the energy. And it's not by chance that in the, say, Eastern tradition and practice and in all the religions of the world, they focus on illumination. They're not so focused on learning, but they're very focused on illumination, almost like you go from experience to wisdom, and wisdom that's actually lit up becomes illumined. So to be illumined is to have an energy field which has got a very bright light. And now that bright light might appear, like you say, by inspiration, and then the person receives a bill, and suddenly they're connected to anxiety, and their energy field changes to a murky, cloudy color. Then they get back into their spiritual moment, and it brightens up again. It's like watching clouds covering the sun. So the consistency is to be able to, and this is where the idea of spiritualize the field. And what does that mean? That means that the life is accompanied by their spirit in an ongoing way quite regularly. And so they become spiritualized. I don't think of spiritual development as developing the spirit. I don't think our spirit needs developing. I think we need to develop to allow our spirit to be present rather than kind of hiding away and not able to participate. And that calls for a great deal more exploration. But the idea that we can be at such a high vibration in our life that we have a spiritualized energy field, and this is what we see in world religions, the halo around Jesus Christ, or the field around Buddha. These images are demonstrating the energies and showing that they've been transformed into a higher vibration frequency. And I'll give one more example because you were showing with the hands. I'll go back just a little bit. But when you see in, for example, a statue of Shiva, she's got like 8 pairs of hands. There's a pair here, a pair here, a pair here, a pair here. Well, when the aura is conductive enough, when you move your hands, the image stays there. So what they were showing was that there was such a conductive field around Shiva, as an example, that you could see multiple arms at the same time. And they put that into statues. Then people think, oh, that's a tradition. It's not a tradition, it's what they used to see. So it's a fascinating journey once one starts to get into this idea of the different shapes and colors and forms in the field. One last example is the Balinese dancers who wear these very long brass fingernails, so their fingers are accentuated. Well, they now use brass fingernails because the energies are not strong enough to be so visible. But once upon a time, those they were not extensions; they were actual energies coming from the fingers. We'll find evidence of this also in ancient China, in many parts of the planet where these things were understood and then have become tradition. But in respect of these times, as these energies are becoming more conductive and stronger, which I believe they are, that's like looking at the bigger tides of energies coming through the planet, more and more people are feeling sensitive to changes in the subtle energy. We even get names now like I'm an HSP. Like, what's that? A highly sensitive person. You know, their character, their actual classifications that people are putting to themselves because they're picking up on energetics more so than, say, 20 years ago.
When you talk about Balinese dancers and other such phenomenon in various traditions and cultures throughout history, you're talking about people who perfected with tremendous discipline a certain unique energetic focus such that it manifested in their field. Part of the premise of number 13 here, development, refinement, and connection work, they all shift in the shape and nature of the subtle energy form, which I know has been a central part of your work, essentially teaching people, educating people, giving them experiences and access to the different dimensions of energy in their life. What we're describing here is that you now do not need to become a Balinese dancer. Because of the nature of the change that's underway, as which you describe as the intensifying conductive powers that planet Earth is beginning to build and shifting from low conductivity to increasing conductivity, which we typically can see the evidence of which in communication, in technology, in the velocity of change in the world, and also in the amount of chaos in the world. All that is just an expression of an increased conductivity. In your work with this domain of giving people access to this, what else would you highlight on premise 13 over and above what you already said? And then I'll bring the other 5 and you'll discover that you spoke to already premise 20 when you talked about spiritualizing. So
one thing certain things are a surprise, but one thing that I discovered is helping people to manage what's already happening. So it used to be that I would try and be teaching people how to, for example, sense and feel the human energy field, how to use their eyes to begin to see it. I mean, I've taught thousands of people how to do that. Now it's more people coming to me saying, I'm feeling things, I'm seeing things, what's going on? And so then it's a matter of it's okay. It's not something which is abnormal. This is actually part of our human design. It's part of our system. Be glad. And they're like, but I thought there was something wrong with me. No, be glad. This is natural to our human system. We're able to we have a more physical life, a denser life. We also have a finer energetic life, and we can even develop and refine further. But it is very useful to be able to manage the sensations to some extent. And one of the big things on that is taking away the fear. Because when the person is afraid that something is off, then they try and shut it down. So welcoming it and realizing, this is something I can work with. That then is a really important part of, it's a new premise in a way. It's like a new premise which offers a new promise. And I keep coming back to that, but it's just too good not to put it, because we can only operate within the premise that we're given. We've given the premise of 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, a human form. That's our premise, and we can work within that. The squirrel has a different premise. Yeah, well, the rest of organic life, they all have their own premise. We have the human premise, and the possibility is changing as the new energies are amplifying and coming through, as with that solar flare coming through. It's also really interesting in relation to what's happening from even deep space, where there's suddenly gamma rays coming through, and that's causative, but in ways that we can't necessarily point to. Happenings in the ionosphere, they are having an influence on us, even marginally. But as we develop and refine, we move more into the world where we can register and feel what's happening. It also means we're more sensitive to getting away from more toxic energies. So that's also very useful, because if we don't know the difference between a toxic energy and a beneficial energy, we'll just go through life as if it's all the same. Oh, energy is energy, but it has very distinct levels. And so, going into a casino is a very different energy than going into a church. And we can register that there's a difference. Why is there a difference? Because they've been dedicated to holding a different kind of vibration. And when we start seeing the world that way, I found that's the biggest step in re-educating ourselves, is acknowledging that there are these different levels of vibration.
Which leads us directly to these last premises. Because what we say in number 16 is that the universe invested more energy, more work, and more refinement in developing a human form than in growing a daffodil, or even the squirrel that you mentioned.
Yes.
And we can say that because there are more complex systems that the human need to run. The human, most of those other forms, the deer shows up and within seconds is able to run. My grandson took 9 or 10 or 11 months to begin to walk. Why? Because the human system is wired to develop the learning capacity. And that is a whole other different, more sophisticated, more complex system than the one given in the automated form to the daffodil or the squirrel. So 17 offers that higher value forms represent greater levels of investment in terms of energy, work, and refinement. It doesn't mean that the daffodil or the squirrel are not as precious in terms of life, but it means that the human form, the human model, is a higher value form in that it represents greater levels of investment, energy, and work. And so therefore, building, or inside that, the awareness that building and growing requires more effort and energy than destroying. We see that anything that you look at, it's a lot easier to take it and smash it to the ground than to actually build the many small parts into a working model. That is true in the physical world. It is also true, and perhaps even more so, in the energetic world, because you take tremendous amount of refinement for the filamental structure to be fashioned when you develop yourself in attunement with a new domain of knowledge or a new domain that you are looking after. It takes time. And what I'm proposing in 19 is that higher value forms are calibrated by capacity. Okay, so our capacity in many ways is greater than the one of the daffodil. First of all, we can go places the daffodil can't. The squirrel can run around mostly in the vicinity of where it emerged to life. We have the capacity to travel physically and certainly to travel with our mind to the other side of the world. So higher value forms are calibrated by increasing capacity, increasing complexity, and by the form representing higher level of integrity, higher level of fidelity in terms of the purpose that it is here to serve. And there is also the rarity and the preciousness of that form, and mostly the value. And I'm talking about, not suggesting here that human life, this is not an invitation to the theology that human has the mandate to destroy all other forms of life, not at all. What it is saying is that when we look through the eyes of the universe, of what was invested in those creations, the creation of a daffodil, the creation of the squirrel, the creation of a human being, the more precious, the more rare it is, the more complex and the higher and more vast the capacity to serve and what it enables, all of those, they represent a higher level of form and a higher level of value. And I am proposing in number 20 that spiritualizing the universe, spiritualizing the world, spiritualizing the universe is doing the refinement work, doing the connection work, doing the embodiment and ensoulment work that enables the universe to birth its higher possibilities and potential through our participations. Because again, the physical forms that we see around us, they are already the human-made forms and the naturally evolving forms. They are mostly in their heaven in the sense that they have reached their end stage. What we are describing in this idea of development and refinement and ensoulment and spiritualizing of the world and of the universe, we're describing that there is the part of the universe that's unfinished and is evolving, and that we're actually put here. As you said earlier, you said this planet is sacred. It was consecrated into matter to be a place that enables biological life to emerge, physical biological life to emerge, which is a lot slower and a lot denser than what is pure energetics, pure plasma state energetics, because it is the slowed down biological physical form that allows the change of form and the refinement work to occur, which is so precious and so unique in the greater universe. So these are the 20 premises that emerged in trying to reverse engineer the state of being and the state of awareness that I experienced over the weekend as we exchanged messages, and I thought we ought to build some platforming into that. Where are you going with your wings, the wings of your mind and the wings of your energetics with these last few premises?
Well, the 21st state would be born out of the 20 in actual human development in a person. So that the opening premise would then appear with what looks out of a person's eyes when they have that spiritual property coming out of their eyes. It said how the soul can look out of our eyes. Well, the windows to the soul, but they also can be the windows to the spirit. Like in the East, they talk about a darshan, which is a look that's got such a potency that it's a blessing. It actually carries energy to another person, which they can then receive. Well, I absolutely agree with that. When someone is in a higher energy state, whatever we call it, whether we call it darshan or spiritualizing the place where they are, they're transmitting a spiritual potency. It's coming out through the eyes. Fascinating, because the eyes are the only living tissue that we can see in a person. You know, when we look at a person, we see, as your granddaughter said, it's the softness of the skin, but skin cells are coming off every 28 days. They're skin deep. They're a moon. They're dedicated to the moon, our skin cells, because they're a 28-day cycle. Our eyes are directly part of our brain, and they're living tissues. So when you look in a person's eyes, there's the light that comes out of the eyes, which is why it's so weird when people put on dark glasses and you can't look in their eyes. Yeah. So there's a light, and it's also coming out through their entire energy field. We just tend to recognize it more from the eyes. So humans, we have this incredible range where we can be almost angelic at one level, and we can become pretty much demonic at the lower level, which is where we get this incredible range of human behavior. Only humans on the planet, to my mind, have been given the permission to do wrong, to mess things up. Whereas the rest of organic life is on its program, it's doing what it's doing, it's 100% doing it, and it may be vibrating at a higher level than a particular human. If a human is standing next to a daffodil and the human is full of rage and hate and contempt and other lower vibrations, the daffodil may actually be hitting a higher vibration than the human. It doesn't mean that the daffodil has a higher form, but it's all in the way the human uses it. So the spiritualizing, when a person has that spiritualized process, they walk into the forest and the trees and the animals and the flowers, they welcome the human. But if the human goes walking in the forest and is full of anger and resentment and the mortgage and what's wrong, and I'm checking their digital media whilst they're going through the forest and seeing what's on Twitter, whilst they're walking through the forest, well, everything retreats from them because they're on a lower vibration frequency. So we have that amazing promise within the premise of a human form, but we're not given we're not told this is how you have to use it. We're given the amazing, probably the greatest gift of all, which is the permission to decide how we choose to use it. And if we choose to be in the higher vibration energy fields, then we move in the direction of being spiritualized. If we choose to be in the lower vibrational fields in an ongoing way, well, our spirit's not able to then come out and participate. Use that through that last word. It's higher possibilities and potential through our participation. Well, the choice is what level do we participate in? If we participate in giving our life to pulling a one-armed bandit, as they're called in Britain, like going to the casino and looking to see if we can get 3 apples all in a row, well, we're at a low-level frequency. If we're seeking to connect and move in the direction of Homo Universalis, to use that term, then we're moving into a higher frequency band. And each of us has the potential of creating our own sacred individuality. So we're an individual, but it's not then a matter of identity. It's more a matter of real individuality, which is the form that's in our energy field. It's almost like our energy field form that we form up during our life, and for which the body is a carrier. Death is a change of form, not an end. So we then inherit the field that we've created in the trace of our journey.
Well said, David. So when we truly recognize that in everything you're describing, whether it's the human capacity to choose higher, more refined frequency range in the process, in their intention, in their way of being. When we do that, I'm looking again at the word participation.
Yes.
We recognize that we are part, that we are part of a greater whole, and we have an opportunity to do the issipation. The issipation in that is our, what you describe as unique, precious individuality. It's the contribution work that the Universalis form that we're able to foster, and what it does inside the greater whole, because it's this idea that when you change one fractal of the whole system, inside the whole system changed, because everything is connected to everything else. So this all emerged inside the contemplative state of being, where I recognized that in a matter of sometime minutes or sometime hours, I found that I was reformed into a whole new configuration. Because as you said, with your thought process, with your sentiments, with your connections, especially with what you choose to serve, you literally can walk into different. You're no longer seeing life as just me, the physical person that I know. Life becomes a large mansion of possibilities, and you walk into every possibility is represented by another chamber. and you may be working, in my case, I'm working on half a dozen or more projects. And every time I enter those domains, they're not words. These words are not just words on slides. They represent living being of a vibrant nature. They represent subtle domains of possibility that when I cogitate, when I ponder, when I dwell with, when I abide with those domains, they change how I feel in my body, they change how I feel around me, and they impact and change the various circumstances that I get to interact with. So that was the idea of these 20 premises which you alerted us represented part of the promise of human life.
Yes, and producing a 21st state.
Indeed, the 21st Universalis possibilities and abilities.
Yes, yes. And the word, I think it was the philosopher Kant, he said the word is not the thing. The word is not the thing itself, but I think, yes, but the word can tune us into the thing very well. So not to underestimate words. Again, they can be seen as a label, like getting in the way, but they're also a tremendous gift. Like language is another amazing gift to be able to tune us in to different forms of energy, so many of which are invisible, not physical. You know, if we're tuning into hope, tuning into love, tuning into peace, these are energies. These are not, you can't produce a bucket of love or a bucket of peace. You get a bucket of water, but these are energetics. These are qualities, and they're describing different levels of vibration. And right back to premise number 2, the universe contains a full spectrum of energies, and inside those different levels of energies, different qualities come to live. I would say peace is at a higher vibration level, what that word is connected to and tunes us into, than the energy of war. You know, that's a classic binary example, like war and peace. They're different energy states, and they don't live in the same space at the same time.
Well, so how about if we lend it with this and with the recognition that, by the way, you can play with this jigsaw puzzle, because you can put premises together. You can take, as you said, premise 2, the universe contains a full spectrum of energies, and bring it into a unified contemplation with premise 18, that building and growing requires more effort and energy than destroying, and that love and devotion and, as you said, peace, and peace inside peace, require more investment of work than, say, upset or polarization. And the last thing you said there was the invitation for us to recognize that we can tune into different energies. And the one thing that I find that helps more than anything else is doing this work not just on your own, but being part of a circle or a pod or a crew or a community or a circle where there is an inquiry like this. Like in this situation, if I didn't know that you said, yeah, let's get together, I have no idea what you have in mind, but I'll play jazz with you. If I didn't have that catalyst, I probably would not be creating this slide to simply offer us scaffolding. So there is something that we proffer to each other. There is a space that we create for each other to walk into the possibilities that we wouldn't be able to walk into on our own. So that's a whole other dimension in this, which is what is the universe of energetic possibilities that we create for each other, that we can't reach for on our own. And it was the sentiment that I initially reached out to you with a couple of days ago, when I said, I'm so appreciative and glad that we have the space and the opportunity to play more you're still here, that I'm still here. We get to play together and inspire each other, and hopefully inspire others to join us in the inquiry of this profound evolutionary change that's underway for this sacred planet and for humanity, that we are sensing and recognizing is to do with a change of energetic form that's gradually emerging through us humans. And that is these are some of the premises we were hoping to reach for right when we started Current Openings. And me reaching out to you a couple of days ago essentially had the sense of, well, let's not delay it anymore. Let's address it right here, right now, because it's important.
Yes. And being here is not a given. Like to value and appreciate myself and Joanna, my wife, we were saying this just yesterday, one day at a time, value it one day at a time. Being here is not a given. And to be able to engage in this today is it's like a privilege and a pleasure. And I do appreciate the speed and the facility and the level at which you brought these 20 premises together. And it says that something had to be moving to cause it to come together. So long may it be so. Yeah.
Thank you, David. To be continued.
Thank you, Aviv. I enjoyed myself very much. I hope others do also.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.